Hi students, Mrs. Gaunt here again, and I am on processing activity 1 for week 6, and usually I let you do the processing activities all by yourself. This time I'm going to work through this whole entire processing activity with you. So it might sound like it's a kind of a long video, but when we're done with it, you'll be done with this assignment. If you have not already done the notes page, you should go do that first, because what we talk about here won't be easy to understand if you have not watched the videos and done the notes page first. So turn this off and go do the notes page if you need to. But if you're ready to start this activity with me, get comfortable. You know, I'm here with a cup of coffee. I got a little cookie that I'm eating as I go. I really feel like when you're sitting down to do homework, you should make yourself as comfortable as possible and make it as enjoyable as it can be. All right, you can't really listen to music because you're going to listen to me, but maybe I'll sing for you. Ah, kidding, I'm just kidding. Okay, processing activity 1. Okay, so if you've watched the video, and I'm sure you have because you're good at following directions, right? You learned about all these different organelles that we find inside cells. I've got 2 pictures of cells on this page, and they are different from each other. It says what to do, label the organelles in these cell diagrams. And above this cell, it says this is a picture of a blank cell, and above this cell, it says this is a picture of a blank cell. So here we're talking about eukaryotic cells. They both are. And maybe you remember from your notes that the 2 kinds of organisms that are made from eukaryotic cells are animals and plants. And that's what we have here. And they are really very similar. There's only a couple of differences between animal and plant cells. And one of those differences is that plants have a cell wall. That was from kind of the end of the video that you watched. So which of these 2 cells looks like maybe it has a cell wall? If you said this one, you're right. You can tell that it has actually 2 lines that go around the outside of the cell, where this one only has 1. You might also notice that this one has a more boxy shape. Plant cells have a more boxy shape. And there's another organelle that's only in plant cells, but I'm going to save that to the end. So as we go through this, I'm going to tell you what all the cell organelles are called. I'm going to tell you where the labels go, and you guys should type it in right along with me. So just like we did in the notes video where we had our video and the work you were doing in OneNote side by side, you should do that again. And it's probably best to make this bigger so you can see it all. You're still going to shrink it so it's only half your screen, but I'm going to leave it like this for now. All right, so I said that the labels in the animal cell are really similar to the labels in plant cell. You'll see me go back and forth like this. I hope that's not confusing to you, but we'll just do our best with it. All right, so we just said a second ago, we just said a second ago that this bottom one is a plant cell, so let's go ahead and label that. And just like in the notes video, I like to kind of highlight a chunk of the blank that you're filling in and then type plant. That way you can still tell that was a blank you had to fill in. I think that's important. And then up here, this is a picture of an animal cell, so I'm going to highlight a chunk of that blank and type in the word animal. All right. So we just said that the plant cell has a cell wall surrounding the outside of the cell, and so we need to find the arrow that's pointing to the outside of the cell. And we've got this one right up here at the top left is pointing to the outside boundary of the cell. That is the cell wall. So here's what I like to do when I'm labeling these things. I'll come over to the right and I'm going to type cell wall. Then I'm going to grab the box and move it right where it needs to be. I like doing it that way because then I don't have to worry if I'm too close or too far away, or if I'm going to be running into the picture when I start typing. It just seems easier to me. All right, cell wall in the plant cell. Now I'm going to move back up to the animal cell and start labeling things. And I'm going to try and go kind of in the order of the organelles that you learned about in the video. I think that might help you out a little bit. So right at the beginning of our video on the notes page, it said 3 things that all cells have are cytoplasm, DNA, and a cell membrane. So we need to find the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is that gooey jelly-like substance that's on the inside of the cell. It's what all those organelles are floating around in. You know, cells aren't just empty air. If they were air inside the cell, then all those organelles would be kind of just rolling around the bottom of the cell because gravity would pull them downward. Instead, they're floating around and moving with purpose through that cytoplasm. So let's label the cytoplasm. Again, I'm going to type the word cytoplasm out here. C-Y-T-O-P-L-A-S-M. And then I'm going to drag it to the arrow. And the right arrow happens to be this one that's pointing to the kind of the blank space inside the cell. All right. I'm also going to label it in the plant cell. And here's a tip that you can do. If I click on this guy and right click and copy and right click and paste, then I have another cytoplasm word that I can drag down here to where the plant cell is and add it to this box. Okay, if you need to pause to catch up with me, then pause to catch up with me. Don't let me keep talking if you're still working on something. Pause the video so you don't miss things and have to keep going back. Okay? And I know some of you are probably thinking, hey, I'll just fast forward the video and go to the end of it when she's got everything labeled, and then I'll just label my diagram to look just like hers and I'll be done. So what's wrong with that? I'm actually a teacher, you know, and while I'm talking about this stuff, I'm teaching you about it. So if you go move ahead and just label everything, you really haven't learned anything. And the points I'm going to give you for finishing this really are not worth it unless you've done some learning along the way. So be honest, be a reliable, trustworthy student, and stick with me in the video. This is homework. You'd be doing that if you were at school anyway. And so just sit with me and do this with me. It's a learning process. Okay, so we labeled the cytoplasm. And now heading back up to the animal cell, because I'm always going to start at the animal cell. One of the things that we are learned that all cells have is DNA. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Where do we find the DNA in a cell? You watch the video, you should be able to answer that question. So think about it while I go get my draw tool. I'm going to get a pen. Hopefully that's small enough. Where do we find the DNA? The DNA is found inside the nucleus. So I'm going to draw the DNA inside the nucleus, and you probably have never drawn DNA before. We do that a lot in 7th grade. So I got my little pen, and I'm going to draw it right inside the nucleus here. So watch what I'm doing. I'm going to make a curving line. It's curving on purpose. So you make that. Pause me if you need to. And then I'm going to come back up to the beginning again. And I'm going to make another curving line, but my curves are going to go opposite the way they did the first time. Watch. Okay, so when I'm done, I have this the lines are crisscrossing, so they make these little spaces in between. So DNA is actually, the shape of molecules is really important. And DNA has a really unique shape. So think about a ladder. A ladder has two sides, and then it has the steps in the middle that you step when you're climbing up the ladder. Those are called rungs, R-U-N-G-S, rungs. So DNA is shaped like a ladder that's been twisted, and the twisted ladder looks like this. So we have to draw the rungs in between the two sides of the ladder. So come back with your little draw tool and try and make the little lines. This is going to take me a minute or so to make all the lines, so I'm going to pause the video. You pause it too and you finish, and then we'll continue. Okay, students, I used my draw tool to draw my DNA. Here's what it looks like in my animal cell. And then I did it again. It's a little more sloppy in my plant cell, but DNA is in both animal and plant cells, so make sure you do both. And then I still have my draw tool. So if you don't know, the way to get back to typing is to come back up here in the toolbar and choose type. Okay, so now I have, oops, choose it again, stay. Yep, so now I'm back to typing, and I'm going to make my screen big again. Okay, the other thing that all cells have is a cell membrane. So remember on this plant cell, we said that plants only have cell walls, but there's this other little line on the inside that represents the cell membrane. So I'm going to type cell membrane, and then even before I move it, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it. Whoops, did it paste somewhere? That didn't happen. Okay, I'm going to copy it again. Actually, I did copy it, so let me try pasting it. There it goes, okay, because I have a cell membrane right over here. And I have a cell membrane up in my animal cell as well. So I'm going to drag this up there. And it goes right here. So for the animal cell, it's pointing to the outer surface of the cell because the animal cell does not have a cell wall. Right? Okay, so those are the three things that all cells have: cytoplasm, cell membrane, and DNA. So then we moved on into where we started talking about the specific organelles. And the first one we came across was the nucleus. So I'm going to type the word nucleus. Nucleus, I'm going to copy it and paste it so I have two. I'm going to use my Control C and my Control V. The nucleus happens to be this pink thing in the animal cell. So it's the arrow that's pointing to the inside of the pink. So I'm going to drag my nucleus label right over there. And then I'm going to drag the other one down for my plant cell. It's also pointing to this darker pink circle inside the middle of the cell. Okay. All right. The next thing on our list was a ribosome. Hopefully you remember a little bit about ribosomes. In the video, it showed the nucleus as a sphere with a couple of little holes in it, and the ribosomes came out of the holes in the nucleus. The ribosomes are made inside something called the nucleolus. So we're going to label a couple things here. So I'm just going to type nucleolus, and I'm just going to type it in two places. Nucleolus. I think that maybe is a little bit quicker than the control copy, control paste thing. And then I'm going to type ribosomes in both places. Ribosomes. Remember to pause if I'm going a little too fast. So the nucleolus, if you remember from the video, was a thing that's inside the nucleus. So that has to be this golden sphere that's inside the nucleus. So I'm going to grab it, drag it over there. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. In this picture, it's like a light purple color. Nucleolus. And then the ribosomes, there are actually two places we see ribosomes, but we're only going to label them in one. Ribosomes are the things that make proteins, and making proteins is like the #1 job of your cells. So ribosomes are super important, and they're very tiny. They can be in two places, I said. When they come out of the nucleus, they can just float around in the jelly cytoplasm, but they can also attach themselves to the endoplasmic reticulum. So we're going to see them in two places, but we're only going to label them where they're floating around in the nucleus, in the cytoplasm, and that is right down here. These little purple dots represent the ribosomes. And if you looked elsewhere for little purple dots, you'd see some right here and some right over here because they just float around in the cytoplasm. But remember, they also attach themselves to the endoplasmic reticulum, which we abbreviate as the ER. So you can see them on part of the endoplasmic reticulum right here. But let's go up here and label the ribosomes in the animal cell. Again, they're these little dots. There's some over here as well, and some up here at the top. We'll just label them in one place. And just like in the animal or in the plant cell, some of those ribosomes are attached to the ER. So we might as well label the ER. Okay, and maybe you remember from the video that the ER looks like, well, it's right next to the nucleus. When I see it in pictures, in my mind, I think it looks like silky fabric that's been folded or bunched together because you can kind of see the ripples in it. That's what the pictures of the ER look like to me. And the parts of the ER that have the ribosome is called the rough ER, and the part of the ER that doesn't have the ribosomes is called the smooth ER. So I'm just going to type it right here. And since I'm outside of the box, I think I can just type right here. We'll call this the rough ER. Make sure your ER is capital. And we'll type here by the next one. We'll call it the smooth ER. We got to do that down here as well. I'm going to type outside of the box. Rough ER. And smooth ER. All right. Next thing is vesicles. Vesicles were the tiny spheres that held the proteins and took them from one place to the other. So the vesicle just looks like a blob, and we're going to label, I'm down in the plant cell, and I'm going to label this pink thing as a vesicle. So I'm going to come out here and type V-E-S-I-C-L-E, vesicle. Vesicles just carry things around inside the cell. And over here, I'm going to label this pink thing, which is on the opposite side. So I'm going to type it outside the box, vesicle, and drag it over to the other side. All right. Okay, next we have, in the video, you might remember that proteins, which looked kind of like snakes, leave the ER in a vesicle, like it pinched off and it floated through in the vesicle and it went to another, it's kind of a yellowish colored organelle. In our picture here, it's not yellow, it's purple. But that thing that the proteins went into was called the Golgi body, or the Golgi apparatus. Golgi is probably the name of the person who discovered it, so it doesn't actually mean much, but we're going to capitalize it. G-O-L-G-I space body. Golgi body. And that is this purple thing right here. So in a diagram or a picture, the ER and the Golgi body look really similar in shape. So if I ask you in a test or something to label a certain organelle, you can tell the difference between the Golgi body and the ER because the ER is always right next to the nucleus, and the Golgi body is not. It's going to be floating around inside the cytoplasm. So let's do this. Grab that label, put it right down here, and I'm going to go back to my plant cell, do the same thing. Golgi body, and right there. All right. Next thing on our list. In the video, they talked about how cells, and especially plant cells, have a large storage organelle called a vacuole. And in plants, they usually just hold water. So hopefully, looking at the plant cell, you can see that there's a giant space that looks like maybe it's holding water. That's what this is. And that's what helps plants stay upright. Maybe you have a living plant inside your house that you have to water every week or so. Maybe you've seen it where like you left for a trip to go visit your grandma or something. Maybe you forgot to water the plant, and when you came back home it was all wilty. Okay, so over time, the water that's inside this vacuole can seep out of it because your body needs it elsewhere. And when the water leaves that vacuole, the cell kind of starts losing its shape. It's not standing straight up anymore. It's kind of slumping downward, and that's what causes your plants to wilt. So after you came back from grandma's house, if it wasn't too late, you might have been able to put some water in the pot of the plant, and within an hour or so, maybe it was all standing right up again, because that water that you put in the plant was absorbed in the roots and came into each cell and filled these vacuoles up again. So the word is vacuole, V-A-C-U-O-L-E, and that goes with the big organelle that has the blue stuff inside, which is water. And there is no vacuole in our animal cell. You just don't normally see that. You may, but not ordinarily. All right. Next on our list, we learned that lysosomes are like the cell's garbage collectors because they remove waste. Lysosome is something that we usually only find in a animal cell, and we're going to use this guy right here, this one that's pointing to a small blue space. We're going to call that our lysosome. So lysosome is L-Y-S-O-S-O-M-E. We're going to move it right over here to label that. And you know what? I would love for you to go get your draw tool one more time. Click on your pen, and let's put some dots in here to represent the trash that our lysosome is collecting. So trash could be things that like old organelles that have stopped functioning and they're just floating around in the cytoplasm and kind of need to get out of the way. A lysosome, which looks a little bit like a vesicle, would come and enclose the garbage that needs to be taken out. It would just kind of wrap around it and suck it inside and break it down. And then it may take it to the edge of the cell and push it out of the cell. All right, so now that you have some trash in your lysosome, you can go back here and press type and then come back to a full screen so we can finish labeling. We're getting there. So there are no lysosomes in the plant cell. All right. Next we have the mitochondrion. And if you were listening in the video, it told you that what happens in the mitochondria is that's where your cell makes energy. Mitochondria. Okay, this is a mitochondria. Oval shape with some kind of zigzaggy lines in the middle. And because the mitochondria is what's used to make energy, we call it the cell's powerhouse. And you might remember that by thinking the mighty mitochondria, very powerful organelle. And so I'm going to move this over here and label it in the plant cell as well. Mitochondria. And that is down here also. So before we move on, I want you to count how many mitochondria are in the plant cell. I see that there's one right here, and there's one right here. So there's 2 mitochondria in the plant cell. And how many in the animal cell? 1, 2, 3, 4. You should think about that. Does it make sense that the organelle that makes energy, there's more of them in an animal cell than there is in a plant cell? If you think about it, that should make some sense, because does a plant need a whole lot of energy? It definitely needs some energy because it is functioning when it makes its own food and when it produces proteins and stuff. It definitely needs energy, but it's not moving around. It doesn't have to walk or hunt or eat. So it does not need the same amount of energy as an animal does. So it should make sense that there are fewer mitochondria in a plant than there are in an animal. It should also be reasonable to you if I asked you, which kind of cell do you think would have more mitochondria? A skin cell or a muscle cell? Hopefully you said right away a muscle cell, because definitely muscles use way more energy than skin. They both still make energy, but the muscles need a lot more. So they would have way more mitochondria in them than a skin cell would. All right, we're getting to the end, guys. Next thing on our list was something called a cytoskeleton, and there is no picture in here of a cytoskeleton, so I'm not gonna label it. That it'll be fine, but just so you know what it looks like. Sometimes when you look at drawings of a cell, actually, I'm going to use the line over here. They just look like kind of like sticks. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let me just get another line. They just look like sticks inside the cell. And the reason they're in there is they help the cell to keep its shape, kind of like your bones of your skeleton help your body stand upright. If you didn't have any bones, you'd be a puddle on the floor. But you aren't, because your body is given shape by your skeleton. And that's similar in a plant and an animal cell. So I guess since I did that, I'm going to go do it in the plant cell. You guys might as well too, because you're watching me do it. You might as well join me. Put a couple of sticks inside your cell. That's the cytoskeleton. You have to keep coming back to get the more lines. You know what? There's another thing I can tell you that might make this a little bit less frustrating. I just realized it. So hopefully your menu is staying open up here so that you can just click on things and drag them down. If it doesn't, like if it looks like this to you all the time and you have to keep coming up here to click on draw to make it show up, you can make it stay there by clicking on this pin over here on the right. So like if I didn't have that clicked, then every time I chose something, my menu would go away and I'd have to keep opening it up again, like this. But if I click on the pin, it just stays open and I can keep going up and get pens and colors and shapes. I'm going to do one more line. Put it right there. All right, now I'm going to go back to the bigger picture. All right. So then the very end of the video, it started talking about plant cells, and it said there are two things that plant cells have that animal cells do not. One of those things is a cell wall, which we already labeled. The other thing is something called chloroplast. This is how you spell it. CHLOROPLAST. Chloroplast. And chloroplast in plants is where photosynthesis happens. So photosynthesis happens in these green organelles. They're green because of a pigment called chlorophyll. And when we look at plant cells in a microscope, that's actually what we see, little green blobs, and we know that those are chloroplasts. Okay, I do see that I missed one. So two, actually. So let's go back to the top one. We got two more things to label. This, remember, this pink thing on the animal cell is the nucleus, and it has a barrier around it that's very similar to the barrier around the outside of the cell. The barrier around the outside of the cell is called a cell membrane, and the barrier around the nucleus is called the nuclear membrane. So out here, I'm going to type nuclear, N-U-C-L-E-A-R, space membrane. And that's this label over, or this arrow over here, coming from the edge of the nucleus. All right, come down to the plant cell again and label the nuclear membrane. Oop. That goes right here. Okay, last thing we're going to label is something I'm not going to ask you to remember. We won't even really talk about what it's used for until we get to, like, I think it's, it might even be when we get back from break, so we'll see. This guy that looks like a sun is called a centrosome. Centrosome. C-E-N-T-R-O-S-O-M-E. And that goes with the sun. Thing that looks like a sun. Whoops. Right. And then centrosome up here at the top. Centrosome. There we go. All right, students. So, got that all labeled. Good job. I know that was a bit of a long video, but you're also done with your assignment. So, I'm going to stop the video. There is another processing activity, and there's going to be a very brief video on that one as well so that you understand what I'm asking you to do. So stick with it. It's best if you can do all these soon, one right after the other if you can, but best not to wait more than a couple days or you're going to forget the information that you're learning. All right, thanks for sticking with me, guys. See you in the next one.